The Formula 1 World Championship heads to the Marina Bay Street Circuit in Singapore for the 15th time this weekend for around 18 of what's becoming a quite fascinating Formula 1 World Championship season. Oscar Piastri goes into the weekend with a 25-point lead over McLaren teammate Lando Norris after his absolute disaster of a weekend last time out in Azerbaijan, with Max Verstappen a further 44 points back after his win in Baku. Piastri will be looking to bounce back from what was probably his worst ever F1 weekend, with a strong showing at a track which has yielded mixed results for him so far in his F1 career. In terms of the Constructors' Championship then, McLaren will have their second bite of the cherry of sealing the Constructors' title. They obviously failed last time out to outscore Ferrari with a necessary amount of points, and this time out they can win it by outscoring Mercedes by 14 points to seal the title in Singapore. Some track facts for you: it's going to be the third of 5 night races for the campaign, as well as being the penultimate street race for the 2025 season. It is a 4.94 kilometre track made up of 19 corners, with 12 to the left and 7 to the right, as well as having 3 DRS zones to assist with overtaking. In the 15 races, there has been 7 different winners that we've had in Singapore, with Fernando Alonso taking the first win for Renault in 2008 in a race which is known only for that and absolutely nothing else. Really, nothing else. I promise. Sebastian Vettel is of course the most successful driver in Singapore with 5 wins. He took 3 for Red Bull and 2 for Ferrari, with Lewis Hamilton being second on 4. Other winners include Nico Rosberg, Sergio Perez, Carlos Sainz, and of course last year's winner Lando Norris. This is of course the only track on the 2025 calendar at which Max Verstappen is yet to win a race. So can he go ahead and break that duct this weekend? 10 of the 15 races have been won by drivers starting first, with only 2 coming off the front 2 rows, and only 1 outside the top 10, with Fernando Alonso being that in 2008 in that race that, again, I can assure you is only known for that and nothing else. Why are you looking at me like that? It's for nothing else, I swear. The circuit has had various tweaks over the years since its inception, meaning this will only be the 3rd race with the newest variation of the track, with several of the turns being either reprofiled or removed altogether. The lap record is held by Daniel Ricciardo from last year's race, so the 134.486, while Lando Norris holds the all-time track record for his pole lap last season, which was a 129.525. Looking back at last year's race then, as mentioned, Lando Norris took pole position before storming to victory, just under 21 seconds ahead of champion Max Verstappen, with Oscar Piastri taking the final spot on the podium a further 20 seconds back. It was also the final race of Daniel Ricciardo's Formula 1 career, signing off with that fastest lap of the race for RB, as he was replaced by Liam Lawson after this race. So moving on to predictions then. So in terms of who I think is going to start on pole for the Singapore Grand Prix, I do just about think that McLaren will probably be the quickest car. Again, obviously they were off it in particularly Baku, but I think they weren't quite on the level of Red Bull in Monza either. I do think the pack has come a bit closer to them over the last little while, but I do think ultimately that Singapore will be a McLaren track. I think they were really good around here last year, in particular Lando Norris. He took pole pretty comfortably last year, but like I said, Red Bull have found something, and I think I back Max Verstappen to put it on pole, quite frankly. You know, he's been the difference. You know, he seems to be able to pull out a lap from nowhere, unlike anybody else. I do think I am just going to go with Max. I can see him nipping in ahead of Norris and Piastri, and maybe even George Russell. You know, I think Mercedes went well here a couple of years ago, less so last year. But yeah, I think I'm going to go with Max Verstappen to go on pole position. Top 3 then. Yeah, I think I'm just going to pretty much go in the same vein. I think I'm going to go with Max Verstappen first. I think if he gets pole, I think this will be the year that he finally wins at Singapore. Obviously, it's the one track on the calendar he hasn't won at, as I mentioned earlier. I do just about think that if he can manage to take pole, that I think he will win the race. I think second, I think it'll be Lando Norris. Like I said, he was rapid around here last year. I do think the McLaren will probably just about be the quickest car, but if Max Verstappen gets pole, I think Max Verstappen leads off the line, and I think Lando Norris will have to probably just settle in behind. There's not huge amounts of overtaking spots around Singapore, so I think he could find himself a bit stuck, particularly if the Red Bull does have that straight line speed that it seemed to have, in Monza and in Baku. I think McLaren could struggle to get past. And then third, I think it will be Oscar Piastri. Again, he hasn't been on Lando's level in Singapore the last couple of years. I don't think it's his best track. He was 40 seconds. I know he started 5th compared to 1st for Lando last year, and he wasn't as consistent as he has been this year. But I do think that it's probably not his strongest track. And if Max does win and Oscar finishes 3rd, all of a sudden that championship gap starts to look a little bit smaller. I think he'd be okay with finishing 3rd if Lando finishes 2nd, because it's only a 3-point swing in that sense. But having Max pulled in 10 points on you again, it starts to look a little bit ominous. But I think that's the way I'm going to go with it. I think Max Verstappen 1st, Lando Norris 2nd, and Oscar Piastri to complete the podium. Start of the show then, who do I think will be, obviously apart from probably the ones maybe that are going to be on the podium and that, who will be the best driver of the weekend? I debated maybe George Russell. I know he crashed a couple of years ago here when he was chasing down Sainz and Norris, but generally he tends to go pretty okay around here. But I think I will go with Fernando Alonso. Look, he's obviously, as mentioned, the first winner of this race, and again, it's the only thing that is ever remembered for. He's won around here twice. I think they weren't great in Baku, Aston Martin. I think they might be a bit better around here, and I think in a race that's so taxing and a race that's so physically demanding, you need an experienced head. And I think, there's obviously no one more experienced in Formula 1 history than Fernando Alonso. So I think we could be looking at, a cheeky little P8, P7 if we're lucky, for Fernando Alonso to get a good points haul and finally get ahead of Lance Stroll in the Drivers' Championship. On the flip side of that then, who will be the biggest letdown? And look, it feels a bit harsh to call him a letdown in this sense, but I have a feeling about Liam Lawson this weekend. Obviously he's had a fantastic race in Baku, best probably weekend of his Formula 1 career, I'd imagine. Can't think of too many better. It's definitely his all-time highest start and his all-time highest finish. So, he'll be looking to obviously carry that momentum into it. Again, I was kind of debating between him and Yuki. Maybe Oliver Behrman as well. Just, I'm thinking similarly, on a similar vein to what I was thinking with Fernando Alonso. This is going to be a race of attrition. It's a race that, you need a cool head. And Liam Lawson has been known to be a bit of a hothead, a little bit crash happy. Now look, a couple of years ago he came in here and he qualified Verstappen and Perez, I believe, knocked them both out, and he finished in the points, and it was a fantastic drive. So, wouldn't be surprised if he did that again, but I don't know, I just have a feeling that, he could hit a barrier at some point this weekend, and, I think it would be a bit of a letdown considering how good he's been in the last couple of weeks, but it's kind of what I'm feeling might happen. So Liam Lawson for the biggest letdown. So wildcard predictions then. So these are just going to be a couple of little predictions that I'll make that I think will happen throughout the weekend. So firstly, and this one sounds pretty safe, but I'm going to predict at least 2 safety car periods during the race. And I know what you're thinking. It's Singapore, duh. There should be red flags, yellow flags, safety cars, VSCs. But last year there wasn't even a single yellow flag. So I'm going to predict that this year things will be a little bit different. As well as that, we don't actually get all that many safety cars these days. The drivers are generally pretty reliable. You know, they generally keep it on the road and avoid big crashes at least. I think we had a run there, I think it was last season, of like 7 or 8 races without a safety car. So I think we'll get at least 2. As I mentioned with the kind of previous segment, we're going to have a lot of young drivers in this race that have never had to race at Singapore before. You know, we've got Antonelli, Hadjar, Bortoletto, Behrman, all of whom have never... I don't think Behrman raced at Singapore last year, but all the rest of them definitely haven't raced at Singapore last year. So I think that one of them's bound to pin it, really, aren't they? And you've also got Lance Stroll. You know, duh. Then, other than that, I think that Lewis Hamilton will outperform Charles Leclerc this weekend. Look, did he outperform last weekend? Not really. I think Leclerc, although qualifying was still bad, I think Leclerc obviously qualified ahead of Hamilton before he put it in the wall. In the race, I think he was on course to finish ahead of him, and then I think the strategy kind of killed his race. They boxed him too early, got caught in traffic. Hamilton was allowed to run long. Then obviously they tried to do the switcheroo at the end and just didn't work out. But I think Hamilton's quite good around here. Look, obviously Charles is a great qualifier, and I think he's put it on pole around here before as well. But I just have a feeling that Lewis Hamilton generally goes pretty well around Singapore, and this could be a real step forward for him this weekend. So those are kind of my wildcard predictions. Let me know who you think is going to win, who you think is going to be on pole. Give me some wildcard predictions of your own, and thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.